that lovely, lovely song that you've just heard about God in the skies and the angels and the Panis Angelicus myths? Yeah, there are gods in the skies, but the mortal gods had now been completely overtaken by the PISO fraud. And I'm showing you images now that tell you that the PISOs wrote the Bible, that they wrote it under the name Josephus, which they released into popular culture, and they released that bit as one of the gifts of the world's great writers. All of the Roman Empire frauds all across the world, even 150 years before Christ. Julius Caesar was here in 55 BC. Julius Caesar has the same initials as Jesus Christ. And when the PISO family released the Bible, which you've just seen, Church of Scotland version, in 79 AD, from that villa papyri that they lived in Naples, that is what happened. Yeah, and all of that is incontestable. It's in Wikipedia. There is the image of the villa papyri that was rebuilt right in the heart of Naples, where the mint is run by the PISO Frugi family, and they issue the currency, yeah, called the peso, and all over Latin America it's called the peso. In some of the countries it's still called the peso, and they released that currency from the mint in Rome as the PISO Frugis, yeah, 120 years before Christ was born. And on it they had a picture of the kelpies, and the coins were called asses, which is part of the joke. And Jesus, when the Bible was finished, becomes the ass in the story. Right then, so you're now in the inner circle or inner ring. It's the most exclusive club in history. It has consisted of those religious, political and literary leaders having knowledge of the great secret that the Calpurnius PISO family of ancient Rome created the fictional Jesus, the New Testament, the Church and Christianity. In welcoming the general public to this knowledge, the following introduction is appropriate. Originally, this explanation was designed solely for Jews, and I want to explain that to you first before I show you the power base that understand this story for all of human history. Because there's the power base as it stands now. That's Mr. James Roosevelt, Sarah Delano Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. That's the American side. Samuel Prescott Bush, Prescott Sheldon Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush. His nickname is Poppy. Thus completes the family chart, tracing the 2 US presidents' descent from Philip of Macedonia, circa 360 BCE. And in the first tier of the children of that person, you have Lagos the rabbit, which is the Winnie the Pooh joke through all of the wars in all of world history. And the big ears jokes are part of the Phrygian hat Aegean stories, as the Pauline religion, the fraud, was launched all over Europe, and all of the pagans globally were culled. And I want to show you how they do that before we move on. Okay, so there's the confirmation of what you already know. I've found a new version of this PDF with more authentic looking images in it, and some more images which are very explicit, like this one. Okay, it says, "The truth makes you free. It is not incumbent upon you to finish the work, yet you are not free to desist from it." And that's a citation by Percys, with the word pi in it, Avoth. Yeah? "Since PISO's day, each few centuries have seen repeated holocausts against Jews, and herein possibly lies a meaning from the recent Holocaust. Jews can only be free of PISO's story and of the anti-Semitism it has fostered when they acquire positive perception, posper, insight into the creation of Christianity. Only with that knowledge can they effectively struggle against any attempts to eliminate them physically by holocausts or spiritually by craftiness and guile. Do not believe that the Jews are not themselves involved in the plot. All of the leading Jews in the story, including King Herod, the person who made the decision to crucify Julius Caesar, and the people that were the two people beside him, one of them was called Dumas, that's the French joke, and the French are all through the jokes. The Chazal totaled the commandments at 613 they were willing to use, and there is the genocidal methods, and that's Treblinka, right next to, within 80 kilometres of the Warner brothers' birthplace. There's the plan for the death camp. There is Pope Pius XII, the Nazi genocidal Pope in World War II, and the Pope in World War I was called Pope Benedict, which is why the Nazi Pope in the last generation, who now lives in an elite mansion in elite Rome, that's the Nazi Pope Ratzinger, his name was Pope Benedict, because that was the Pope in World War I, and they know that they have a fraud expert coming at them with absolute truths, and that's why that man was the first in history to be chucked out of office as a living Pope because of his sins. I don't know how he's getting on in the face of his maker, but I do not want to speculate on that. There is a man who took part in a massive joke about the Nazi profiteering in league with all of the G8 countries in World War I and World War II, and that man's name, he plays the role of Midnight Cowboy. That is a film about laundering the Nazis out of Odessa in Eastern Europe, where all of the PISO family and the Rothschild family emerged from. Sorry, the Rothschild family eventually emerged from there, and that's us into World War I and World War II, with the papacy totally complicit in the war crimes of the Brits, the Germans and the Yanks, which is why Delano Roosevelt, FDR, pledged never to take his kids into the war, like the sun gone in, can you see it? That like Woodrow Wilson did in 1914. By 1916 they were in there pitching, and that is all of the Brandeis frauds and all of the coercion by the Jews of the Christian leadership. Do not believe that there is an innocent denomination if they worship someone who is a human god. It's a total stitch up, and to keep the numbers down as well as the wealth divided. Right then, let's get through the pictures. So there's the family home. This is what makes me really God-fearing, and I mention it in most videos I make. And when you realise that that is absolutely coincident with the release of the main chapters, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, then Vesuvius vents its opinion through the gods in the skies, and all over the Pauline missionary route there are earthquakes and massive volcanic actions like that. And the Monty Pythons team describe that as the hand grenade of Antioch. The Monty Pythons team are much more astute in their religious knowledge than Archbishop of Canterbury or the Pope. Those two are just profiteers. At least the Pythons have the wits to understand the whole of religion is a fraud, but the worship of the gods is a very important thing. Otherwise they can get really, really angry, and the complications in pathological terms or geophysical terms can be quite severe. Right then, so I'm telling you, in the last few videos, this is the first video I've made in 10 days because of the harassment on my home. I've now had six sectioning threats from Dr. Ian Fingland has called at my home on 4 occasions now, and his colleague, the consultant from the BGH, has called twice. The last time he called, he was in the process of telling me that I did not have the picture, his permission to take a video. That was 45 minutes after I'd allowed him in, provided I could make a video of his conversation. He came in an unmarked vehicle the second time with a thuggish looking colleague in their anoraks. Yeah, and then I got a phone call. So that's 6 sectioning threats. Yeah, everything that I've published about them has been hanging around my neck, and all of the citizens in my town now understand that they get 40% of their salary to use too many drugs on their victims. And it's as simple as that. And I tried to help them stop that and to get it off their conscience in 2011, and the first sectioning threat from Finland came in 2011. He trained as a policeman before he trained as a medic, and he openly declared that as I made the video at the door of my house. He's not come back so far. Okay, right, let's show you the pictures. So there's Lagos the Rabbit, and there's Winston Churchill, the world's greatest politician, yeah, who committed the Gallipoli genocide in World War I and was back in the War Office just in time to commit the whole of the genocide in World War II. And the sun's gone in again. There's Philip of Macedonia. There is Lagos the Rabbit, which is the bunny ears joke. Yeah, and there is Alexander the Great, and there is now, several generations down after all of the Egyptian pharaohs, yeah, and all of the jokes about the Egyptian pharaohs, this one's particularly clever, because that's Katy Perry being an Egyptian concubine, yeah, and she knows full well that her initials are the same as Calpurnius Piso's, and that is the KP Nuts joke at the Fox News cinema for all of human history. And Fox News and the Pathi Empire cover everything in those massive genocides in the death camps, and it was all openly broadcast when I was a boy. On watching the Winnie the Pooh movies, which have now been strictly censored because they are a direct clue into the leadership of the world and all of the great conflicts and the pseudonyms that the world leaders use in those. That's Winston Churchill, who played Tigger in World War II. Okay, there is an even more vicious joke, because that is our current Windsor Queen. She's been in the news and she's been in the borders a lot, because she's the person that leads the whole world now. She's the richest person on our globe, thanks to the money lenders that are the Rothschilds and the Montefiore's and all of those people that work in the back room. Montefiore is Mountain of Fire, and the Montefiore's link in to the British power base through the Dukes and Duchesses of Sutherland, who started off as the Murrays and the Murrachs and the Murdochs. Yeah, the Murdochs are in the same team. They've been to the colonies because the Duchess sent them all out there, and they were gifted their passage back by the CIA, run by his son George W. Bush, and that was how Murdoch got his citizenship in America. Okay, he is George Herbert Poppy Bush, which is the joke about Poppaea being the wife of the murdered Nero. Is that right? Nero, Rome burned. Yeah, he's the one that was the husband of that person. And you've got Marianne with the M and M at the beginning and the end, because she sired the most powerful Piso of all, and that was the illegitimate child of one of the Roman emperors. I forget the name of the emperor at that time, but the most powerful Piso of all time is Arius Calpurnius Piso, and he's the man, and he's somewhere on that listing. Let me see where he is. Arius Calpurnius Piso, Josephus, yeah, the man that was pictured on the front page. Okay, and she is illegitimate for 163 years. Her dad was Winston Churchill by artificial insemination, and they've killed the man that released all of the explicit details of that. They have put all of his photos are still on my website. I May Be Killed Next. Yeah, that's Greg Hallett. They have planted false sheriffs called Halley to cover up all of my exposures on all of that, and law enforcement globally is a total fudge. There's the PISO Pistorius trial, yeah, of Oscar Piso with the Christian cross in the middle. Yeah, that is the massive joke about the Blade Runners and God's pathologies that are afflicted on or imposed on the evil, leading them into the roles in the absolute dismemberment of society. And there's the leaders of the Antonine Nerva movement that moved out of Rome and took Christianity into Constantinople so that we could have Islam born there, and they took Christianity into France and the Frankish nations. And the rest of the story that I'm going to tell you today takes the Flemings, who sang that song that you heard at the beginning. Yeah, that is one of the Fleming people. All of the people that are in the religious stories and the geopolitical frauds are world leaders for all of biological time, except that one. That's me. And behind the mask is the mythical gladiator. Okay, that's the concept that the slaves can overcome the elites who are incapable of fighting for themselves. They can overcome them only if they come together. But now what they do is they watch the Rugby World Cup on the telly, which started last night, which means that he and she and all of the tyrants will have their way with them yet for another fortnight at least, or however long it takes to complete a Rugby World Cup. Okay, so let's keep moving. So this is the naming of the Nile by the same family. That's the Pishon. Okay, the Pishon or Pison is one of 4 rivers mentioned in the biblical book of Genesis. That's the oldest book in the world. I think it's alleged to have been 6,000 years before Christ. In other words, when man could get up on his hind legs and walk around much more efficiently than the apes. Yeah, and when they began to write in about 2000 BC, that was invented in Canaan, and that is the end of the civilized world concept, because the whole of the rest of it is a fraudulent story. Every chapter, every verse, every sentence. And the numerical code that the PISOs launched is much, much cleverer than the profiteering code that was the Bletchley code in wartime, yeah, and the binary code that is computing, because the computing story has let their secret out, and the whole world is beginning to know it. Okay, that's the genocide in sub-Saharan Africa, 6,000 miles from London, committed by Butcher Jones in the Dad's Army joke, who is actually guilty of killing all of the American Indians up there. Yeah, that's the 5,000 nations joke. In rugby, it's the 6 nations joke. Okay, so the peso is still used in it's still used in Mexico, and it's still used in the Philippines, where we had the massive biblical floods and tornadoes just 2 years ago. And the pieces of 8 that were used in all of those countries are sometimes called the peso. Okay, that's the pieces of 8 in the Robert Louis Balfour Stevenson's story about Treasure Islands. And the Treasure Islands are the Channel Islands that are just off the coast of Monterey, where Robert Louis Stevenson lived. And that's the devil's joke in the Devil's Advocate movie, that it happened in Monterey a long, long time ago. The globalized fraud and the ruling of the world's law enforcers as the world's mafia. Main article: Spanish dollar legal weight 27.468 grams. Peso was a name given in Spain and Spanish America, commonly known as a thaler, one of the gods in the Aegean. Yeah, Thales. Okay, and there you've got the picture of the Garden of Eden and the Jewish stories about that place. It's got Mazrib, the story about the Garden of Eden, and Mazrib being used out of the male torso to create the first female, who created the original sin by eating the apple. And the name of that place now is the Yemen, because I've got everybody focused on the fact that the Garden of Eden was the joke about the Garden of Eden. And there it is, scanned by the US Navy using their scanning tools and their mapping tools that creates the whole of Google Maps, and it confirms that the data in that scanning is due to the agency that is NOAA, the US Navy. That stands for NOAA. Do you get it? There's the Pathy News and all of the stories. So that's the... So T is the name of the Christian cross. The Tee story of Little Aden by Harry Cockerell. And this is the cock crowing 3 times when St. Peter denied that he knew Jesus. Because there was no Jesus ever to know. And the Sphinx is the lion lying down, and all of the Lion of Judah jokes about Khartoum, and the massive jokes about the River Nile, and all of the places that Sir Henry Wellcome visited there, all of the way down that river valley, which is now totally, which was for a long, long time, totally owned by the British Empire. And there's the Mad Mahdi, and that is the launch of the demonisation of Islam, which goes on right into the last election, and right into every news bulletin, in every paper, in every one of our newspaper events. Yeah, everything is a lie. And here's the jokes about the Nile, which means PISO. Okay, the 2 rivers meet near the Sudanese capital of Khartoum. The northern section of the river flows entirely through the Sudanese desert to Egypt, and they've canalised that by creating the massive dams. Ends in a large delta and empties into the Med. Egyptian civilization and Sudanese kingdom have depended on the river since ancient times. Most of the population and cities of Egypt lie along those parts of the Nile Valley north of the canalised Aswan Dam, and nearly all the cultural historical sites of ancient Egypt are found along the riverbanks. And here's all of the hieroglyphics that allow them to make massive jokes that even the computer cannot dissect and open up, because the alphabet in Egypt is still a series of images. Some of them are easy to interpret. In the ancient Egyptian language, the Nile is called the Pi, or the Iteru, meaning river. Do you get it? The PISO Pi joke all over the world, represented by the hieroglyphics showing on the left, literally Iterwa. So it's Iteru. So I don't know where the T is in that, and how that spells Iteru. I'm not sophisticated enough to suss that just yet. Okay, meaning river, represented by the hieroglyphics. In Coptic, the words Piaro or Pharaoh, Fiaro, do you get it? Pharaoh in Egypt, meaning the river, meaning PISO. Yeah, and all of it. So the Nile is Nile. Yeah, and that becomes Nile in the jokes about the psychiatrist in America. The Fiaro joke becomes the Pi joke in ancient Egypt, and the Pi word is a legend all over the world, because it gets the Oscars in Hollywood every time. The Life of Pi, the Pi, the racehorse in National Velvet, and all of it is totally childish, but it is the world's biggest secret. Okay, and there is where it culminates with the American presidents. The Murrays are in the list, very near there, and you've got all the jokes in popular culture about the Warrens and the Rabbits still being in the team. I don't know what the Delano joke is at the moment, but when you see it in the supermarket, it's usually on a sausage. And that's the American hot dog joke, because the penis is basted into the bread when they're laying siege to a city, and that becomes the loaves and fishes joke. The fish is the penis, which is why you get sex on a Friday with your wife when you get your pay packet. Yeah? Franklin Deleuze, and if you're lucky, you get the second coming, and all of that is now out in the public, and for these people, it's a huge laugh, because only they can read and write right up to 1914, their biggest ever genocide to date. John Lilly, Abigail Breck, all of the stories in the Robert Louis Stevenson output, all of the world's authors cover up all of these massive sins for all of world history, and the world's doctors, it seems, and the world's coppers, and the word polis has the name PISO in it. Thank you to the innocent looking coppers in the Borders region for coming forward and having a chat. It's really quite exhilarating to see that there are any innocent people left at all on this earth. Yeah, I'm doing this mainly on my own. Yeah, but thank you ever so much to those of you who have become aware of the gravity of the sins and the risks to the family of the pathologies that then ensue if you get in my way. Having seen Fingland for a while, first time he tried to section me, I saw him a lot in his tracksuit on the pavements. Samuel Howard Fay, M. Susan Shellman, the shell joke about the shell being the currency, and the Royal Dutch Shell families, and all of the James Smith Bush, Harriet Eleanor, it comes in a lot, Samuel Prescott Bush, and did you see on that earlier tabloid image of all of them? So there's George Herbert Walker Bush, he's Poppy Bush, and there's Sheldon out of the comedy programme about the academics in San Francisco. Okay? And the Walkers, and all of it is a massive joke. And there's the Howards, a couple of generations of them, that are linked to Longshanks through his mate Howard, the Duke of Norfolk. And that is the Thomas Moore film, and all of the jokes about that. And I'm going to explain to you why the Norfolks live in Arundel, which is actually Sussex, because I've sussed that yesterday, because it's linked to the Murrays and the murders in Scotland, and the names of the family. I'll leave it for later. Yeah, I'm going to expose why the Norfolks are called the Norfolks, and how that links to Sandringham, and all of the stories that Greg Hallett has told us about Sandringham and the corrupted Windsor royals there, and particularly Jimmy Savile and Prince Philip for their corruption against children in massive scandals. Okay? Right then. So, this is about Scotland. And I'm going to take you into my OneNote profile, but this is explaining the Battle of Boroughmuir. Yeah? And it's explaining that that is a joke about the PISO numerical code. Okay? So there were 300 belligerents who came across from Romantic France under Guy, the Count of Namur. Yeah? From France. Here he came from Namur. Yeah? And he came all the way up to here because he thought that it was a romantic mission for him to be sent there. So it's just like the Monty Pythons. Yeah, going along on a little horsey with the coconut. He's got 300 troops and he's taking on the might of Longshanks' great-grandson. Yeah, King Edward III. Okay, and we've got other belligerents against him that are John Randolph, the 3rd Earl of Moray, which is the Murray dynasty, Patrick, Earl of the Marches, and the Marches are in that PISO timeline, yeah, in the Frankish and Belgian era, and you've got the links to the Ramsays as well. Every one of those families are the power brokers, and I'm going to show you how even local families like the Pressens yeah, who become victims of murders, and they do some murders themselves. That is the linkage to the Middleton family. Yeah, the commoners allegedly, and I've told you 2 months ago that Commoner Kate and the Middletons were linked into the Longshanks bloodline, and now understand it totally. Okay, and Pressen is in Germany, and the families that get involved in this little scandal and the Battle of Burghmuir include so Boroughmuir is famous in Scotland, and it's the Rugby World Cup fortnight for rugby. Yeah, it's just to the south of Edinburgh, and allegedly in the story the defenders were backed into the castle at the top of the Royal Mile, and to defend themselves they had to slaughter their own horses and pile them up head high so that they could barricade themselves into the castle. It's all a joke. When you find out how many people died and how many people were involved, it's the PISO code for the cross, 300. Okay? And all of the people that explain that are in the stories that I'm going to tell you about the corrupted people that live near Birgham, that live near Coldstream, or that live in Norham Castle just down the River Tweed, and they are the world's newsmen. Okay, I've got all of their names, so let me read some of those names out now so we don't have to go back to it too often. So the primary sources for that story on the Battle of Boroughmuir, where we do not know how many casualties there were, and the horses for the PISOs, yeah, were piled up head high. Yeah, it's all a sick joke, and all of the names of the people that pretended to be protecting Scotland or attacking it in no particular order, because the Murrays get to come along after the French have been sent home and all of them have been massacred, and they get to pick and rape again the communities that have already been destroyed by their enemies in the aggressive force from the moor just to the north of Luxembourg. And my email, I've made several posts on Facebook this morning because I pleaded with a man called Lord Wallace of Tankerville. That is a joke about that Tankerville in fucking Normandy. Yeah, and he's Wallace because Wallace is associated, like the Boroughmuir fullback, with the Bruces of Scottish treason and Scottish bravery, depending on which profiteering side you are on. If you're an elite or a duke anywhere in this team, you're likely to get the knife in the back from your younger brother. Yeah, and the Bruces are the legends for selling off Scotland, and they were the people that sold William Wallace, and Wallace of Tankerville is a joke about the Normandy town. Yeah, he is the Lord Advocate for Scotland, and I've made a video on that and my pleading with them to let me report serious fraud anywhere in Britain. The police or the politicians are incapable of telling me for 2 years now where you can report any serious fraud and get a response that means that you get a case number and an active investigation, and anybody who's alleged to be a criminal, even in nuclear weapons scandals with no government involvement, run from the city of Glasgow. Yeah, it's all a total profiteering exercise. The world is run like a Muppet cartoon. The politicians are effete. The rugby players are picked because their names coincide with the villains, and even the bishopric, as you'll see later on. So there's the names of the sources for the story about the corrupted Battle of Burghmuir that ended with all the horses getting killed. Okay, that's Bauer, Walter, Forden, John of, Thomas Gray. He's the one that comes into the story involving the Middletons, involving the Pressens in John Lamont's constituency in the town of Cornhill, where the copper's own children were being kidnapped by the Jack the Ripper character out of the Leeds Freemasons. Yeah, and that was a child of my family members in Jedburgh who keep coming into the stories and remember the story about the skater. I will not tell you what their name is. They know that I know everything about those stories. And the policeman just saved the wee girl on the Cornhill Bridge, but one of the others was killed. Yeah, and when you see that all of these are covers for the religious fraud, and that the police are prepared to bang me up, to cut off my energy, to have me arrested, yeah, and not to allow me to plead guilty, in league with the corrupted judiciary. Scotland is in the same condition for all of its history, and there's Nairn, where the Christian Bible was printed, and they had a force 5 earthquake then, and there is press and die right next to the printing press that came from Presen in Germany, where printing was invented, and all of a fucking sudden it's the Church of Scotland's Bible. And it's the same king that creates that, because he's the king as a boy in Scotland and as James I in England, the King James corrupted Bible. Bruce Hay died really young. I do not know whether he was a scamster, but I do not care about that. Yeah, he was in the rugby team, and at that time I thought he was a hero. God has more insight than me. Okay, and all of those names, there's 2 Browns on the listing. Yeah, and that is the Brown affiliation to the Big Ears joke and to the Noddy and Big Ears cartoons launched by Beaverbrook through the World War II cull. And the brownie is the goblin on the church roof in the religious joke, and the ass is Jesus. Okay, so there's confirmation of some parts of the PISO code, but because the word 300 belligerents was used, that is, T was 300 in Greek, it was also the symbol of the cross. Okay, do you get the joke? Reported by Longshanks' mate in Norham Castle, who's the equivalent of the editor of the Southern Reporter today, who's still in the Princess Trust until I got her booted out. Yeah, that is Miss Susan Windram, who reported my persecution and my criminal action in Jedburgh Sheriff Court that led to me being attacked by gillies on the River Tweed who come from south of the border. Yeah, that is on the Duke of Roxburgh's beat, verbally attacked and sworn at and threatened physically. My best man is a Brown. Yeah, he refused to relay my apologies to the woman who was the victim of my assault and the girlfriend of the ambulance drivers, and all of it is now openly published. Yeah, and they're not catching any salmon at all, and they don't understand that bit. Okay. Okay, so this is quite complicated for a simpleton like me, but let me show you how subtle the PISO family and Josephus's jokes are, because this is the man writing here. This was the cross, T equals 300 plus P, 16th letter. Vorik was chosen because it, like a form of PISO's heroes' names, totalled 316 in regular number. Vorik was taken from Isaiah chapter 30, part 7, as was also Hevel, with the mere addition of lamed. Allegorically, the New Testament could be seen as authored mainly by PISO, and his pseudonym is Mr. Hevel we Reek. Upheaval we Reek. Do you get it? All of the Bible is full of subtle jokes about sexuality and all of those things, including the penis going over the wall and all of the loaves and fishes on a Friday joke, and it's the hot dog in America. And Christ is number 600, And all of those false news stories are through all of the culling of all of the American Indians and the 500 nation stories that we've told you. And that is the Putnam Weekly, the journal from the warmongering universities that shares that joke with the world. Oh, sorry. Okay, and here's some more. So there's small numbering codes. There's and here we get the Guy Insous Ker joke and the Ineus joke, because 24 is the code number for Insous, Jesus, and the inscription on the Christian cross in some of the jokes. In others it's Inri, King Inri. Yeah, okay, so this is a small numbering code, and this, all of it, is written by Josephus in Popular Culture, and he's like the man Hastings, who's the editor of the Scotsman and comes to fish on the Tweed. Okay, the 9th letter was I, which stood for Insous, Jesus. Okay, so 9, 9, 9, Christian crosses. Yeah, all of the call out number, the road to Hitler's nest in Bavaria, it's all a massive stitch up. 600, the letter X, and is pronounced Chi in Greek. That's the Cairo joke. Yeah. Calpurnius Piso, beginning to end. Yeah. And Alpha is Arius Piso, beginning to end, and that's on Alpha to Omega. It's on the Paschal candle in the Christian churches, the Catholic churches, where the genocidal Pope does not do a stitch of work. Right then, so William Grey is the 4th son of Sir Thomas Grey of Heaton, near Norham, Northumberland. Yeah, Heaton is where John Lamont would not let me ask those embarrassing questions about the Rothschilds, the Scottish economy, and the plan that Paul Wheelhouse would have if Labour were elected in the referendum. The referendum is a total stitch up. Okay, but I want you to understand the names. This is a local name. Yeah. Broome is the icon for the Plantagenets, run by him. Yeah, for all of that time since the French appeared in our land. Okay, and it's that Broome is the bedroom tax joke, but it is also the place where the Mowbrays live in Kelso. Alistair Hutton, Dr. Fingland, and my deserted wife, yeah, my divorced wife now, yeah, total treasonous, all of them work for the Better Off Together movement, like the sheriff who's interlocked with the dead Better Off Together leader. That's Sheriff Peter Patterson. Yeah, and he also interlocks with the fatal accident inquiry chair. He will not let any of my court hearings, he will not let me speak, he will not let me ask questions of my wife under oath, because all of them are complicit in massive war crimes now, and the profiteering and the cover up of that is absolutely ruthless, which is why my energy has been shut off by the same Sheriff Court that has frozen my assets and will not allow me to pay the bills with that. Okay? Yeah, and all of those videos now have thousands of hits in less than a fortnight, because I've been focused on protecting myself against the straitjacket rather than getting all of these horrible facts out about what occurred through all of our history. Okay, so let me tell you that again. William Grey was the 4th son of Sir Thomas Grey, 1359. Okay, so we're well beyond 1066 now. Of Heaton, near Norham, Northumberland. It's actually at the bottom of the river that is the Ford and Etall River, I forget the name of it, the Till. And that is the joke about Tilly and the kings in Rome way before the Roman Empire got its act together. Okay, so this guy lived with his wife Joan Mowbray. That's the Mowbrays of Broomlands, where Dr. Fingland and Alistair Hutton now live. yeah, the daughter of John de Mowbray, 4th Baron Mowbray, yeah, and the Mowbrays are married into the Sutherlands, yeah, just the last generation of the Sutherlands. The Mowbrays married them. And they have a tiff about who gets to fish the Tweed at Merton, and the younger people, I don't know how they live with themselves, because the whole of it is a crime scene, and for all of world history they have persecuted Scottish citizens, and those Scottish citizens who get persecuted by them are now the Freemasons that entirely support them and send all of NATO's armies to their deaths. That's the children of those people that supported the sending of the colonists to the colonies in the first place. Okay, so the daughter of John de Mowbray, 4th Baron Mowbray, yeah, and Elizabeth de Seagrave, daughter and heiress of John de Seagrave, 4th Baron Seagrave, through his mother, a granddaughter, Margaret, the Duchess of Norfolk. The Norfolk joke will be revealed in due course. William Grey was a descendant of King Edward I. Yeah, that's Longshanks, that's him. His paternal grandparents were Sir Thomas Grey of Heaton and Margaret, daughter and heiress of William de PressFEN. Okay, I'm now going to tell you how that leads to the alias for the Dukes of Norfolk, if you cannot see it already. Yeah, because the Fens are Norfolk, the flatlands, and that's why they get massive floods in even our lifetime. My wife's family, my wife's mum's family live there. Their region was flooded, I believe it was in 1947, massive coastal floods. Yeah, acts of God. He had 3 brothers and a sister. Sir Thomas Grey, executed for his participation in the Southampton plot. Look that up if you like. This is the joke about the Scottish justice system and the leading law lord in Scotland. Yeah, John Grey, 1st Earl of Tankerville. It's in fucking Normandy. And they think it's really funny to make it Wallace of Tankerville, because Wallace is the man that was prepared to defy him, and the launch of the man that is a dead ringer for Dr. David Kelly as the revolutionary socialist who's replaced Ed Miliband, that we have totally exposed as a fraud from Eastern Europe, yeah, and his socialist leanings are absolutely made up, yeah, and all of that has been launched into the papers in the last 2 months. Yeah, look at my website, you'll see all of the denunciations of Miliband, all of their massive crimes, all of the fleeing of his brother David, who was an MP for Newcastle, near this crime scene. Okay, Sir Henry Grey of Ketteringham, Norfolk. Yeah, now you understand it. The Fens place, who married M. Apley. Yeah, the apple joke. Everything for them is a laugh. And there's me ringing that guy there, the little fat Scotsman, Lord Tankerness. He's actually on the fucking Hebrides with Norman Lamont and my new friends on Skype. We're Germans, Austro-Germans. Yeah, that's where World War I started. All of the wars, all of the conflicts, all of the revolutions. And there's what the Scottish Freemasons launch into the Abbotsford region, because that is William Wallace, the joke about the statue, in red brick. Right then. So, watch that video. I'm pleading with every law enforcement system in Scotland and England, can you please tell me where I can report any serious fraud anywhere in our country, and all of them lead me up a blind alley. And that is the picture of me on my Facebook page, and me on my web pages, and me as I make Skypey videos. Yeah, it's very, very difficult to find anyone who's prepared to tell the truth in any of the social media, because they are totally controlled, and I'll show you how that works further down. Okay, so we've got the massive links to Longshanks, and I've told you already about the Treaty of Burghmuir that he pushed through with the maid in Norway who died under 10, yeah, and that proclaims openly that Scots can never have their own country. The Earl Marshals are a joke about the Piso family and the Mars Hill derivative of the Pisos, yeah, that became the Marshals in the Norfolk dynasty in Arundel. Yeah, that is the Dukes of Norfolk. They become the Marshals for our country through all of the history since him. And that is out of Naples and out of Rome with the Pisos and the Piso Fruges. Okay, and I've got Lady Jane Grey and all of the murders for all of the claimants as cover-ups, and all of the religious and moral issues behind that are totally for greed. Okay, and you've got the Middletons, and they come into our place just to the south of Berwick, down the A1 near Holy Island, yeah, where I told you the story in my last video about St Cuthbert being disinterred so that he could make Durham and Durham Cathedral, which is a massive religious fraud that has stood there since 1067, yet without anything knocking it over. And at the bottom of the students' residence, where the students now have to pay £60,000, where their Vice-Chancellor got his education for free, the Vice-Chancellor at Durham, who's replaced the farmer profiteer Chris Higgins, was the boss, or the deputy boss, at the London School of Economics, and he's got massive Ponzi schemes. Yeah, the degrees that he now sells or imposes on his victims in the students' community, £60,000 for everything that he got for free. And Paul Shazza, if you do not get your skates on with mobilising my equipment and the issues of the linkages and the sequestration of all of the equipment that I brought back from the best university in New Zealand, yeah, I'm going to report all of you and all of the laundering frauds of your colleagues in the adjacent buildings. Yeah, the stem cell people are particularly evil. Okay, so we're talking about the north of England, and that is Warkworth Castle. And what we've got is the Middleton story that I'll tell you later reveals that the castles in the Coquet region were the Middleton Empire, and they were also the empire of the Dukes of Northumberland. That is the hosts for the Harry Potter film in that castle at Alec, which is so expensive that I could never take my family into it. That is in the little blue dresses. Pippa Middleton, that's her. She's a deadly shot. She shoots grouse on the high hills overlooking Edinburgh. That's the man that is the Duke of Northumberland, that owns the high hills overlooking Edinburgh, and he owns the beater team from Lauder. Yeah, that's where Sheriff Lothian's wife lived before she was gang bang raped by Sheriff Lothian. And I've asked the beaters if they were invited to that gig, because the whole of Sheriff Lothian's story is just a cover for the financial crimes in Lothian Road in the massive Babylonian empire that the Rothschilds have built there, and none of the other investigators will mention the Rothschilds. So Harry Hotspur was a predecessor of these. I believe he was killed because he was the unlucky victim, i.e. he was not as powerful as the other claimants to the kingdom at that time. And the lion joke is all over the place, and that goes back to the pharaoh linkage of the lion lying down. Okay, these people could, like the Duke of Roxburgh, well be decent. Yet the more you learn about the Insous and Ineus and Insous Ker names and the French connection, last night when I started to make these images, there was a huge black cloud hanging over the Duke of Roxburgh's castle. Yet he told me he did not understand the Aryan master race joke about the Irish wolfhounds and the Wally Dugs with the ribs sticking out, yeah, and the hair coursing jokes about the genocides that occur from time to time after the PISOs launched their story, which is where we started off. Okay, I used to fish the Coquet. It's lovely. They've got red squirrels there, like in the Hoik region. Yeah? Yeah, but none of the ordinary people or the revolutionary people get to fish those places, because all of it is sequestered by these people, and they are total frauds. None of the truth comes out about their history, and they just soak up the country's prosperity, because they have now taken the money stream from the Bank of England and turned it right into their own bank vaults, and those are still in Geneva like they were at the end of World War II. Sorry, I'm not getting onto any of the tabs that I've made. And there's some of the currencies. So there's the PISO frugi coins, 120 years before Christ. Yeah, and that is on the flip side. That's the PISO character that ran the mint in Rome. Yeah, before they launched the fake. And for the whole of Friday, I spent my day trying to get a conscience into the students I've worked with in the South Pacific, aka Australia and New Zealand, because they are shielding now the knowledge that Quentin Bryce made a huge joke about Mr. Bean, the war correspondent for Gallipoli. Yeah, and there is Mr. Bean, the joker from Cambridge University, in the Time team that is run by the man that is the Labour Party fundraiser, Tony Robinson. Yeah, and Tony Robinson's Labour fundraising tune is the Tannenbaum Red Flag song, that is the same song as the Third Reich sang for its charitable Christmas present raising for all of the dead troops joke. Yeah, in the Third Reich and in the lead up and the running of World War II, and that is the Queen's Christmas speech truce joke, and all of it is a stitch up. The Putnam story that you've just heard about the 500 nations and the killing of that, using the Hawkins characters and the Hawkeyes that survive right into the Vietnam fiction. Yeah, it's all a joke about warmongering for profit, yeah, and to keep the numbers down for all of human history, and she totally approves of that. That's Princess Anne. She wants it done with gas. She's a profiteer on many, many boardrooms, including the Olympics commissioning and World Football Tournament commissioning. Yeah, with Martin Sorrell and, in that case, Nick Clegg in the Olympic scandal. And there she is sitting with Prince Phil, yeah, the evil man that runs MI6 and all of the murders, including Princess Diana. Yeah, he runs the Poppy Fund. The British Legion is run by the Duke of Westminster, and Quentin Bryce, when she shared the joke about Mr. Bean, had to retire within 6 weeks of me revealing all of that. And that's Ferdinand Marcos, the wife with the shoes, and all of the demonizations of him, because they still use the PISO in their country, which is the Filipinas. Okay, and there's the Pope, just to show you that it's a massive joke on the flip side of the dictator's coin. Do you remember that Mussolini was a dictator in Italy at the same time as we began World War II, and all of that began in Spain, which is the training ground for all of them, and they get laundered through the Canaries, and the Pope sits the canary on his shoulder, and the whole world is now beginning to understand all of these pictures. I'll save some of these. So these are just the commonplace things that you know already. That's the Panthera jokes, the pants joke about the man Wood, who's the rugby commentator in Ireland, whose dad died instantly because he has a cardiovascular ion channel weakness, and his joke is that he says pants all the time. It's the Panthera leopard joke about the goddess Cybele and the Black Panthers that were the tools and the Panzer regiments that killed all of the Jews in the Warner Brothers Kranz-Usielk region when the Warner Brothers were sent to America as their leading propagandists, so that the Jews could not snitch on their Jewish neighbours, who ended up winning all of the Oscars, including the King's Speech joke. Yeah, Windsor. And there's the cock crowing jokes again. There's the hippo, and that's the joke about the battle, yeah, in the south of Edinburgh. That is the Boroughmuir battle, where they had the horses piled up head high, yeah, and the little romantic man from France who came with exactly 300 troops so that they could make a joke about the fraudulent Bible and the culling of the innocent people in the stories that I've told you about the summer wars. Unless you were a landowner right up to 1914, you had no right to having a home of your own or to having sex with women. Yet you had to be a landowner to get married, and that becomes the fuck word. That's the launch of the royal brothels. That's fornication under consent of the king, launched in 1914. And Commoner Kate was alleged to have worked as a prostitute in the Killing Kittens prostitution den, where her dad Middleton went with Prince Philip and they took the kids. And all of that is in the jokes about the films made by David Niven that include the jokes about the Pink Panther diamonds in Switzerland, where all of these people have their bank accounts and their skiing holidays, and they have become really dangerous now. Okay, so that's the bottom of the slideshow. Let's now take you onto another tab on my web page and show you some of the textual evidence. Okay, so I've shown you already how Longshanks is linked into the Norfolk dynasty in Arundel, yeah, and the Norfolk dynasty, you now understand, is because of that subtle little Fenland joke, okay? And you've got the links to Longshanks all through his timeline, and the links to the Mowbrays, and the links to all of the people like the Petrys, and that's the Hibernian football director, and you've got the links to Colin Cowdrey and all of the Kers of the Jedburgh region. And in these stories, the Jedburgh armies are launched into the conflicts that are to protect Scotland against that Frenchman who's galloped in. Yeah, he's galloped in like the Monty Pythons team with 300 people. Yeah, and that's the joke about the culling of all of those people in the provinces in the summer wars. Yeah, and all of them get sent all across the world into the Tyrol, and one of the characters in these stories are the people that wear the lederhosen. Yeah, which is a joke about the kilt, and the lederhosen is the Germanic equivalent. Okay, that's the leather families, 1857 to 2008. John Towlerton Leather was the man who bought the estate, and is generally referred to as the father of Middleton. The Middletons were alleged to run chip shops in County Durham, but they have got massive mansions, and all these jokes interlock with the Percys, with the Dukes of Northumberland, and with the other families. I forget what the... So Percy is the Perseus link to the Roman court in this ancient story, but the other family is the... it will come to me in the course of time. Yeah, and links to Twisel and all of the ruined castles in my region and the massive places. Okay, so Longshanks got a palsy, which meant one of his eyes was half closed, and that's Horner's palsy. And because the syndrome has the word PISO in it, that's why Longshanks gets it. Yeah, and I've discovered that even when these people were coming into rural Northumberland within years of 1066, that many of them were educated at the University of Cambridge, where all of those Christ College jokes are launched. Anyway, let's get... So there's the palsy in Longshanks' eyes. It's called Horner syndrome, and that is the little Jack Horner joke shared by Born Leisure out of Hemel Hempstead, and the director that they have on their board who runs the colleges in America, yeah, and the colleges in England were launched by the Canadian people who became prime ministers in England. That is the Ashridge College and the Bonner Law legacy to the corrupted world. Okay, so let me just explain the joke about this again, because we've done this one already. So it's known as the Bernard Horner syndrome, and it's oculosympathetic palsy, and it's a ptosis with the word PISO in it. Good on you, God. Right then, so let's just get you into the new information, because we've done all of that before, including the Protestant murders, the Catholic murders, Henry VIII's need to have many, many wives, because God would not let him sire a male child by any of them. And if he did, they were dead in their less than their teenage years. And that is the acts of God and the power of God. And the prime ministers for two corrupted regimes, that is Gordon Brown and our current prime minister, have been the victims of those issues. They now know the way out. Okay, so let's take you up to the top of this. Sorry, I've got the wee computer is running the show today. So this is the history of Middleton Hall, just down the road from Berwick. Middleton, just south of Berwick. It is the Murrays out of Calvados, the French connection. Yeah, that's the Murrays. Yeah, and the I forget what the links to linguistically were, but Calvados is also Normandy. Yeah, and the 100-Year War is just to settle which of the power brokers gets to massacre how many of the ordinary people in their summer wars and all of the wars that last for 100 years, as the French monarchs and the British monarchs, who, remember, were in 1066 just French monarchs too. Yeah, it's all a massive genocide scene, and it's the Murrays out of Calvados with huge links to the Mareschals and Marshals. Yeah, that's another derivation of the Mars molehill from a mountain joke, a molehill to a mountain joke. Yeah, and all of it on their website openly declares that these are linked into Princess Di and the power brokers in our country, including Longshanks. So within a trice of 1066, the frogs are onto Berwick's doorstep. The Middleton lineage nomenclature is not explained, but Kate's commoner bunch is from County Durham, we are told. Let's go down it until we see what they declare as their history. It's a place called Presen, and that is the Norfolk joke. Yeah, because it can be pronounced and spelt PressFEN. The Fenlands joke. All of it is as futile as that, and this is not nearly as powerful as Arundel Castle. Yeah, they're up there, and sometimes they have to fight with spirited local people. Sometimes it's people who are fighting mercenary army roles from France. The romantic guy, yet with the 300 followers, and all the horses piled up against him. Believe it if you like. Right then, and they've got lakes, and they've got history. Previous. Chapter 1, the claiming of the land, 1107 to 1302. So that's 40 years after 1066. The first documented history of the land on which Middleton Hall now sits dates back to 1107, and it's the Du Mouchamp Champ family. Okay? And I think that may be the mushrooms joke that I've been looking for so long. Yeah, because Lily Allen in her air balloon movie sits on the red and white mushrooms and falls off them, and all of that is part of the story. and all of the menagerie that she presents in there, with the horses with the pyjamas on being the asses that are the PISO family, and the PISO frugi jokes about the first coins out of the mint in Rome, yeah, and all of that the Duke of Roxburgh proclaimed that he does not understand, because that is the same joke as the Wally Duggs being in the Aryan master race, which is how I found them. Calvados area of France can be connected linearly to such prominent historical figures as George I, that's the Mad Georges, as George III, Winston Churchill and Princess Diana. And Winston Churchill has his home in Ayton for a long time, and John Lamont, the crooked MP, because he's covering up everything I reveal, it became the RBS. John Lamont now pines for its ownership, and it's been taken out of the public's hands. Yeah, and the RBS fraud is massive. And I sent him a letter yesterday with all of the crimes, or several of the crimes, that have blighted the economy in the energy provision letter, and it went to the country's ombudsman. Yeah, and it went to a whole host of people as well who are now complicit in the war crimes of Iraq and Afghanistan. Yeah, and they have nowhere to go, which is why John Lamont has not replied to me. Last week he boldly declared that he could not interfere with any of my accusations, because the important issue of my persecution in my divorce, which is totally groundless, could not be, he could not step into anything that I'm reporting to him until that's over with. He knew about the Trident and the Lothian Road scandals during the lead up to the referendum, and he openly declared it in a public meeting in Heaton, but not the one in this story on the River Till. Okay, this is Alan Beath's constituency, by the way. So Roger de Mouchamp was originally given ownership of the land by Henry I, but family feuds eventually forced a change. The land then became the property of Stephen Bulmer. Yeah, the Bulmer Air Base, with the golf ball looking down from the top of the hill. We used to come up that coast every time I took my innocent family for their trips to the beach, and it was lovely, and I had no insight into all of the ancient historical frauds and genocides that occurred there. Although all the castles, most of them sorry, the land became the property of Stephen Bulmer, yeah, a gent who married the de Mouchamp family years earlier. Through the following 2 centuries, the land was passed down through the generations till it became the property of David Le Marchal. Do you get the menace of the Marshal word now? The links to the Norfolks, the links to all of those bloodlines that link into Longshanks. Yeah, and in 1302, due to de Marchal's part of the Scottish uprising, King Edward the sun's gone in again. King Edward III punished him by taking possession of the land on which Middleton Hall now stands. Yeah, the most powerful prevails. And I've got little tabs on the side that we cannot see, but I'll put those things back in. Okay, and there's we've got there we've got all of the neighbours, yeah, because the places that I'm showing you on those images and the places that were Warkworth Castle, yeah, are now owned by the Dukes of Northumberland. And there's the images of Kate Middleton with the soon-to-be king, yeah, because he's the son of King Juan Carlos, and you can see the likeness even in that image. Yeah, and that's the bloodline issue that they changed the laws of succession for in 2012, because Prince Phil has no legitimate sperm in him at all. Yeah, he just murders the rivals with the whole support of MI6, and MI6 now runs the laundering tasks and the insurance tasks since all of the war frauds. Yeah, and the people in our town who went as assessors for insurance frauds, yeah, were sent there to reward the elites for all of the false claims that they make, no matter how falsified they are. Okay? So on the 13th of September, William the Presson headed an ambush on the Earl of Moray, and this takes us into the Boroughmuir conflicts, and was duly rewarded with the land of Middleton. Yeah? So 1314 was one of the great revolutionary conflicts, and I believe that was the Hanoverians, the Dukes of Cumberland, which suppressed the people in that one. Or no, that might have been Bannockburn. But everything's for the same motives, and the French and the Scots for long periods of time are in allegiances, but the whole campaigns are botched, and the Flodden story comes into this later on. On the 13th of September, William the Presson headed an ambush on the Earl of Moray and was duly rewarded with the land of Middleton. Fatefully, perhaps, the Presson was a descendant of the de Mouschamp family, and Middleton was temporarily back where it belonged. Okay? And here's the Leathers in the Lederhosen, 1857 to 2008. Okay? Nearby Haggerston Castle.